Well, happy Independence Day to you. I'm meteorologist John Dawson. July 4th, if you're not in the United States, I'm glad you're here. I recognize that we have a lot of people outside of the U.S. who are checking in here with our tropical updates every afternoon. I'm glad you're here. If you were one of those folks who have been in the Caribbean as this powerful storm Beryl has been rolling on through, we're thinking about you. And now we're beginning to focus our thoughts on Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula, because that's next spot that Beryl is headed. So again, this is Fox 26 with our afternoon update. You're watching us on YouTube, or maybe you're on our website, and we're glad you're here. We update these every day of hurricane season, whether we've got a dangerous and deadly hurricane out in the waters, or whether it's a quiet day. We're always here. We hope you're checking in with us all the time. I do want to mention that at the end of our video here, I'm going to point out my YouTube playlist, which is a great way to stay prepared for hurricane season. Also, that link is going to be in the description below as well if you want to click on that. So that's going to be a great way to get prepared. So check that link out in the description of our video here on YouTube. So let's dive into things. There's good news to report in the fact that the 1 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center finally brought Beryl down to a non-major hurricane. In other words, not Category 3 or higher, a Category 2 hurricane. That was with the 1 p.m. update. All the information I have right now, though, of course, is with the 4 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center. So this speed is still moving pretty quickly. We talked about this before. Anything 20 miles an hour or higher, in my mind, is a fairly quick-moving hurricane. Average is usually around 10 to 15. If you get slower than that, then you've got a slow system. But this speed is continuing to stay pretty quick, and the maximum sustained winds now down to 110. So the continuing to see those max winds drop is a big deal for the folks along the Yucatan Peninsula. They'll be very pleased to see that. And again, if you are there, leave us a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. We're thinking about you. This is going to be a system that brings strong winds. It's going to bring storm surge and, of course, a lot of rain. And that rain is something that's going to be affecting the east coast of Mexico, northeast Mexico, as well as South Texas, and probably even for us folks here in Houston and Southeast Texas eventually. It's going to take a little time for all that to happen. So let's roll on through our official forecast. So we're looking at overnight tonight. That means Friday morning very early, when a Category 2 hurricane is expected to make that landfall. We're kind of in the Tulum area. My friend Josh Morgerman, the eye cyclone chaser, he is in Tulum. Last I checked on him, and we'll see if he's going to move around trying to get in the eye of that landfall, and we'll see how that goes. But we do expect this to move across the Yucatan Peninsula, weakening. You'll notice the estimates are not much, though, as it begins to make its way out, dropping down. It looks like our estimates from the Hurricane Center drops to only about 60 miles an hour. So that's not a huge drop. It's still a strong tropical storm. But as we continue to move through the rest of the Gulf of Mexico, that strengthening, that reorganization is expected, and we'll see 75-mile-an-hour winds before it makes another landfall on Sunday afternoon. This, at the moment, is focused on the very northeast coast of Mexico. We're always wanting to remember to try to look at the entire forecast cone. We're not going to get too specific on the center. It's very easy to do that. It's natural that we want to do that. But this could make a landfall a little bit more into South Texas, or a little bit further down the coast into Mexico. And then as we roll on through, we'll expect this to have some impacts even once it gets on the land as a tropical storm, surviving for a little bit, but really churning away and bringing rain all along the South Texas coast is something that we're going to watch. So we'll kind of get an idea of that, just a little bit of a taste of that here in our future cast. Remember, this is the Fox model. This is exclusive just to all of the Fox TV stations and Fox Weather. So this isn't something that you're going to see in other places. So that's glad that you're here checking out. And we've continued to see a very good report here on what our Fox model has been doing. And you'll notice right on cue here early on Friday morning, we get the system moving across the Yucatan Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico, losing its organization, still having some rain, but getting better organized and making that landfall right along the northeast coast of Mexico. And then watch what happens with the rain, still making rain as it slowly tries to creep a little bit further north. And this rain is what's really going to soak South Texas and then also other portions of the Lone Star State as well. Here is one expectation as far as some of that rainfall goes. This would be all the way through Wednesday, where we'll have some areas as high as 5 to 10 inches. As we move a little further north, we drop those numbers down to more like 3 to 6, and then we get in closer to the Houston area and we get 2 to 4. I think these are fairly conservative. I think we could easily do these, at least at this point in time, on what we're seeing. Now, that's manageable for most of us. So it's not that we're over-threatening with what our numbers are when I say these are conservative. I just think that we're going to be able to get some higher numbers because there's still just so much warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico and that moisture that's just lingering around over the Gulf. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to create some rain. We'll just sort of have to give that a little bit more time as it moves on through. So again, here's Beryl. It still looks like a fairly healthy system. It's not as symmetrical as what it has been. You know, here's more or less where the eye is. When you see sort of these this lopsidedness where you see quite a bit of rain kind of banding over here on one side, that's one of those indications that some of that shear is having some impacts on it. Where when there was no shear, it was very symmetrical looking. You could clearly see that eye, and it just was a machine creating itself, becoming stronger and stronger, and you know, becoming those winds even more dangerous. With that shear, it's helped to just weaken the organization overall, which brings those winds, those max winds down, and also just kind of throws that rain around a little bit in different areas, but lots of rain associated with this particular system. Now, one thing that I find interesting is that it's very natural, and of course I've noticed this especially on all of our social media, to try to make comparisons of history of storms that we've seen in the past. And very early on, Emily from 2005 was one of the storms that was brought up, and I'm going to show you that track, but I'm also going to mention that Dr. Philip Klotzbach had an interesting tweet earlier today commenting, as well as at 1 o'clock today when it lost its major category status, that Beryl has now tied Emily with having the longest duration in that major hurricane status before August that we have on record. So I know that's a little bit complicated, but the reason I'm wanting to point this out and kind of make the big deal about this is, again, this is so unusual to have a storm like this so early in the year. Emily was the other exception that we've got on record, and then now Beryl showing that. Emily was a little bit later in July, not quite as early as what Beryl was or is, but it's still the same concept. These are types of storms that are normally in August, and it just kind of shows how so warm and how busy we really expect this season to be overall. So this is Emily's track from 2005, and notice that it waited till it got into the Caribbean and then became a major hurricane, and then it stayed a major hurricane for 4.25 days. So 4.25 days is what we saw Emily at least category 3 through 5, and it stayed that way all the way till it made that landfall into Cozumel. 4.25 days, and Beryl has tied that 4.25 days. So again, the sort of the note here, the record that we're noting here with Beryl and what ties Emily is the earliest on record to have a major hurricane for that long of amount of time before August. Now, of course, we've seen August storms do a lot of other crazy things, but it's just so unusual to have this strong of a storm happening this early in the season. And again, when we're comparing tracks, it is very interesting. Right on through the Caribbean, right across the Yucatan Peninsula, and right on in to northeast Mexico. That's exactly what we saw. But you'll notice Emily didn't just rebound to a Category 1. It strengthened with that rapid intensification all the way up to a Category 3. I think we should continue to watch Beryl to do something similar. I'm not saying it's going to do identical and get all the way back to major category strength, but I certainly think a Category 2 storm would be possible because of just the right conditions, kind of relaxing a little bit with that wind shear and slowing down just a little bit. I think all of that would sort of favor that. I want to talk about the hurricane hunters for just a minute because, again, I'm so thankful for the hard work that they're doing. St. Croix is where they're flying out of currently, so that's going to be back. We're not going to have the time lapse go back far enough to see, but you notice the path taking it all the way back toward the Windward Islands. They've had sort of that remote operations where they've moved from Biloxi, Mississippi out to St. Croix so that those flight times are so much shorter. They could do more work. But it looks like, and I haven't confirmed this with any sort of reading, I'm just watching this flight path. It looks like they decided enough of St. Croix, let's go back home to Biloxi, Mississippi, because when they're done with this flight, it is headed back towards Mississippi. So it looks like they've got all of their folks probably heading back home. And again, this is the Biloxi is for the Air Force Reserves. That's where their planes fly out. They've got those 10 C-130s that they're flying. But what I want to show you that's interesting is our next hurricane hunters that we're seeing is a NOAA aircraft, and I wish I was able to tell you the specific aircraft, but I didn't have time to look this up before we got on here. But notice the different paths. So far, not flying through the middle of the storm. These planes are taking all sorts of readings, helping in the short term, but also the long term. We're taking measurements all the way as it's flying. We're trying to get an idea here of what is this environment out ahead of the hurricane. And once we get a good idea of what exactly is happening out there, and then we'll be able to see the storm move through, see how it reacts. Does it become stronger? Does it become weaker? Does it rapidly intensify? Or does it just completely fall apart? And we'll have a great idea of what that conditions are and how this storm reacted to it. So always gathering data, but it does look like this NOAA aircraft, and they take off out of Florida, this NOAA hurricane hunter is ready to now head into the storm, probably to give some of those measurements as close as they can to the eye. So we'll wait and let them go ahead and, of course, finish their flight and stay updated with that. Here's Beryl again, a closer imagery. That eye is wobbling a little bit. It's not as well defined. Those are signs of a weakening or a struggling storm, and we are thankful for that at this point as we're continuing to get ready for the Yucatan Peninsula to make that landfall. Here's the forecast track once again as it comes in just to the south of Cozumel, going to be north of Belize, and then moving in to the Gulf of Mexico Friday afternoon, and then into Saturday, weakening some. But notice how these start to kind of spread out just a little bit. Here is Friday at 1 p.m., and then it's a little bit longer of a distance between Saturday at 1 p.m. and Sunday 1 p.m. See how the distances are closer together? That's the slowing down that this system is going to be taking. When it slows down, it's going to get a little bit more time over water, and I think that's going to help with its reorganization and creating itself back into a hurricane again. And then the distance from Sunday 1 p.m. to Monday 1 p.m. even shorter. So as it begins to make interaction with land and make that landfall, that slows down even more. And then again, we're seeing those distances. So when you look at a map and you see, assuming that all of these are equal distance time-wise apart and they're not the same on the screen apart, that's an indication that the speed is changing, whether it be faster or slower. And in this case, we're definitely seeing that slow down and not necessarily good news because of that. Here is the American model. I showed you the Fox model earlier. Here's the American model, and we'll sort of roll through and again see a similar track moving across the Yucatan, taking a little bit of a jog further to the south, it looks like, and then as we move in just to the south of Brownsville, notice, and then a jump to the north. This track, this model, making pretty much of more of a straight northerly track once it makes that landfall, continuing to bring plenty of rain opportunities for the majority of the state of Texas. And so let's take a look at another estimate again on what we're looking for. If you're here in Southeast Texas with me in Houston, you'll notice not a lot of rain happening through the week. Once we get into Saturday and Sunday, we have some other factors bringing us some showers and some storms. But by the time we get to Sunday evening, we're definitely seeing the impacts of Beryl down south and beginning to bring a lot of rain up through Monday. So now we're pausing this at Monday night, and notice some of that rain all the way up to the hill country practically. And as we roll on through into Tuesday and Wednesday, starting to spread that out over into the Houston area, so we start getting those higher amounts of rain as a possibility. And again, not to scare, but just to point out that the possibilities are there, that landfall is a different spot, whether it be north or south, that impacts this type of rainfall, whether that means we get more or less. It will all sort of interact and play depending on where that landfall takes place. So I'm not here saying we're going to get 12 inches of rain in Houston because it can happen. Yes, it can, but also we could also get a lot less. I mean, just expect that this particular map is going to have some changes over the next 48 hours, and that's just how it goes. When we get updates, we get a better idea of where we think that landfall is going to take place, and that changes everything. It's kind of a domino effect of things. So we're going to continue to kind of keep an eye on that and make sure that we're ready. So that's going to do it for the tropical update here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, of the post, that I do have a link for you in the description. It goes to my YouTube channel's playlist for the hurricane gear test. The hurricane gear test is a fantastic way to get you thinking about what your needs are, because I can tell you a fantastic plan, but that plan might not work for you. It might work for my family. Your family is going to be different than my family. So we really need to get you thinking about all the specifics of what you need to be concerned with, maybe more, maybe a little less. And I think the hurricane gear test is a great way to do that. I show you some really cool products as well, and then you could be thinking about, well, what do I need to do for food? What about water? What about light? What about power? What are my power needs? Do I need refrigeration? Well, I sure need a way to charge my cell phone because I know the power is going to go out. And then I encourage you to have a first aid kit, a multi-tool, and so on. There's definitely things to kind of keep in mind for that. So check out the link. Go to my playlist for the YouTube playlist and see all the hurricane gear tests. Take some time to go through there, kind of get caught up and get some things planned that you might be needing for hurricane preparations.